Hey everyone, it's Bigfoot. I have a special video in store for you today. Today's video, I'm actually talking to my former self. I asked my former self what kind of gear would have been nice to have on the trail that I would have sacrificed the weight for. As you may or may not know, last year I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail and I spent a lot of time dialing in my gear. I did a ton of pre-hikes and I probably spent about a year and a half kind of figuring out what I needed, what I didn't need, what was essential, what was not essential, and kind of went to that whole balance of safety and comfortability. Well, when I asked my former self, there were a few things that came up that were really important that I wish I would have had on the trail, and I want to cover that today. So to start off with, let's get into clothing. Most of this is clothing. And I will tell you the reason why, first of all, clothing was at the top of my list. Now, I have a pair of socks here, an extra pair of socks. I got a pair of ex officio boxer briefs and an extra shirt. And what I brought on the trail was 2 pairs of basically each item. I always had 2 shirts, I had 2 pairs of shorts, I had 2 pairs of boxers, I had 2 pairs of socks. And basically, I would have 1 pair that would always stay dry. It was my camp pair, and 1 pair that I always hiked in. Now, what was really difficult when I talked to my former self, and the thing I probably regretted the most, was in the mornings having to put on my cold and usually was very wet clothes from hiking the day before. I sweat a lot when I was hiking, and I was putting a lot of miles in. And there were many times that I was not able to dry out my clothes for the next morning. And I will tell you, for the weight that I would have to spend to have an extra shirt, an extra pair of boxer briefs, and an extra pair of socks would have totally been worth it. These 3 things combined was an extra 7.8 ounces, so not even a half a pound, and I honestly can't think of a better way to spend an extra half a pound on top of what I already had than these 3 things here. And basically what I would have done is I would have still kept my camp clothes the way I did during my thru-hike, but I would have 2 sets of hiking clothes. I would alternate each set of hiking clothes each day. So no matter what, each day I would have a dry pair of boxers, a dry shirt, and dry pair of socks. Now, the clothes that I had worn the previous day, I would just hang them on my pack and let them dry out, or tie them to the lashings on the side of my pack to let them dry out during the course of the day. Now, I will tell you, I thought about this quite a bit when I was on the trail and I just never did it, but this would have been a total morale boost. And again, for less than 8 ounces, I totally think it would have been worth it. The next thing that I would have had, I started in the end of April, by the way, April 23rd to be exact, but I really wish I would have had a pair of thermal longs for my bottoms. And the only thing that I had was what I'm wearing right now, which is the zip-off pants. And it just sometimes wasn't enough when it was the chillier mornings. You know, typically I probably saw temperatures below 40 degrees maybe 5 times. And there was a few times that, man, I really wish I would have had the extra thermals, which I think these Patagonia thermals maybe weigh like 4 ounces or something. But I would have sacrificed that weight to have this and just be more comfortable and be warm. Not to mention, if there was any nights, which there was one night that I believe I was a little cool in my sleeping bag, this would have been nice to have. I probably would have set this home sometime in the middle of May, but that first month on the trail, definitely wish I would have had a pair of thermal longs. And the last thing that I wish I would have had, I did not have a bag liner in my pack. The Arc Blast or any of the Z-Packs bags, you really don't have to have a bag liner. If it was downpouring rain, there can be some moisture that gets inside of your pack. The only times I ever experienced any moisture getting inside, my actual pack was on the very bottom. But I went through, I know, there was one day that I think it was downpouring about 10 hours. And on the bottom just had a little bit of water that kind of seeped through. So overall, I didn't think it was necessary. However, if I did this all again, I would definitely bring this Thermarest NeoAir X-Lite pump sack. And this is multifunctional. Number one, it acts as a pack liner. So I would have a pack liner. So if there was any issues with any moisture getting inside, I'd have all of the stuff like my clothing, my sleeping bag, packed in here. I wouldn't have to worry about it. But the other thing that this duals as is, like I said, it's a pump sack. So what you do is you fill this with air, you close it, and I would connect my NeoAir X-Lite to this little circle, this little opening here in the very bottom of the pump sack. And this only works with the NeoAir X-Lite. Might work with a couple of other models, but as I know it, it only works with the NeoAir X-Lite. But basically, I would use this to fill up my NeoAir X-Lite. That was probably the thing that I dreaded the most getting into camp, was blowing up my X-Lite, because it's not so much that it takes a ton of time, but with all of the miles that you're hiking and sometimes you might be out of breath, the last thing you want to do is blow up an air mattress. The other nice thing about having a pump sack like this is when you're using a pump sack, which by the way you can also kind of jimmy rig a garbage bag and get this, I guess, same sort of functionality, but this is just so durable. I don't know if I would trust a garbage bag to last, and you can always replace it, but for whatever these are, 20-something bucks, I think it's worth it. But it's not going to put moisture inside of your NeoAir X-Lite. A lot of folks don't like having to blow up their pads because when they blow into their sleeping pads, they're getting the moisture from whatever moisture and saliva is inside your mouth that you're blowing into that pad, which can cause mold in the pad. So that would be another nice thing about going with a pump sack. But I tell you, for what this weighs, which off the top of my head is just between 3 to 3.5 ounces, I totally think it would have been worth it. All in all, the combined weight of all these things is under a pound. I think it's like 14.8 ounces. And I definitely would have gone this route for a little bit of the weight and made my thru-hike just a lot more enjoyable. And especially in the morning when I knew I would have something dry to dress into, that totally would have been a huge morale boost. Anyway, if I did anything differently, this is exactly what I would do. And as a matter of fact, in my upcoming hikes and thru-hikes, this is exactly what I'm going to add to my gear list. So that wraps it up, guys. Thanks so much for staying tuned in. I'll see you next time. And remember to always follow Bigfoot.